CEO sees little black girl picking trash to fund mom's treatment, unaware he's actually girl's real dad. The sleek black Mercedes came to a grinding halt as traffic stretched endlessly ahead. Derek Hayes drummed his manicured fingers against the leather steering wheel, his jaw clenched with irritation. The digital clock on his dashboard glowed 3:47 p.m. He was already 20 minutes late for the Meridian Industries merger meeting, a deal worth $47 million. Damn construction, he muttered, eyeing the sea of brake lights that seemed to mock his expensive German engineering. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from his assistant, his legal team, his board members. Each ring felt like money slipping through his fingers. The GPS lady's mechanical voice suggested a detour. Turn right in 200 feet to avoid traffic delays. Without hesitation, Derek yanked the wheel right, diving into a maze of narrow streets he'd never seen before, despite living in the city for over 2 decades. The scenery shifted dramatically. Gone were the polished glass towers and manicured sidewalks of downtown. Here, paint peeled from weathered buildings like old skin. Broken streetlights stood like silent sentries over cracked pavement, and chain-link fences surrounded lots filled with weeds and forgotten dreams. This wasn't just another neighborhood, this was a different world entirely. Derek's Mercedes moved slowly through streets barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass. He felt distinctly out of place, like a tuxedo at a garage sale. Residents sitting on stoops watched his car with curious eyes, some whispering to each other. Children played in tiny front yards behind security gates, their laughter echoing off brick walls. He was calculating the fastest route back to civilization when movement caught his peripheral vision. A small figure darted between 2 parked cars, dragging something heavy behind her. Derek pressed the brake pedal, his attention fully captured. It was a little girl, no more than 9 or 10 years old. She wore a faded pink t-shirt that had seen better days and jeans with patches on both knees. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail secured with a rubber band, and despite her small size, she moved with surprising determination. What stopped Derek cold wasn't just her age, it was what she was doing. The child was systematically going through trash cans lining the street, her small hands reaching deep into bins twice her height. She pulled out aluminum cans and glass bottles, examining each one carefully before placing them in a large garbage bag she dragged behind her like a reluctant pet. Derek watched, transfixed, as she approached another bin. She had to stand on her tiptoes to reach inside, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. When she found a crushed soda can, her face lit up with the kind of joy most kids reserved for finding $20. Something twisted in Derek's chest, an unfamiliar sensation he couldn't quite name. He found himself pulling over, the Mercedes's engine purring to a stop. The merger meeting, the traffic, the $47 million, everything faded into background noise. He stepped out of his car, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the broken asphalt. The girl hadn't noticed him yet. She was wrestling with a particularly stubborn bottle wedged deep in a trash can, her small arms straining with effort. Derek cleared his throat gently. "Excuse me?" She spun around, startled, clutching the bottle against her chest like a protective shield. Her eyes, large, brown, and impossibly wise for someone so young, studied him warily. She took a small step backward. "I'm not doing anything wrong, mister," she said quickly, her voice carrying a defensive edge that broke Derek's heart. "These are just trash. Nobody wants them." Derek held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not here to stop you. I was just curious. What are you collecting all those cans and bottles for?" The girl's posture relaxed slightly, but she kept the bottle pressed against her chest. She looked him up and down, taking in his expensive suit, his polished shoes, his watch that cost more than most families, made in 6 months. "You wouldn't understand," she said finally. "Try me." There was something in Derek's voice, a gentleness he rarely used, a sincerity that surprised even him, that seemed to reach the girl. She studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether he was trustworthy. "For my mom's medicine," she said simply. 4 words. 4 simple words that hit Derek like a physical blow. Your mom's medicine? He repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. The girl nodded solemnly. She's sick. Real sick. The pills cost a lot of money, and we don't have insurance anymore since she couldn't work. So I collect these, and Mr. Johnson at the recycling place gives me money for them. Not much, but every little bit helps. She said it matter-of-factly, as if explaining the weather or her favorite color. There was no self-pity in her voice, no plea for sympathy. Just a child stating the reality of her world with heartbreaking acceptance. Derek stared at her, his throat tight. How long have you been doing this? Since summer started. About 3 months now. She shifted the bottle to one arm and wiped her nose with the back of her free hand. Mom doesn't like it, but she's too tired to stop me most days. And we need the money. The merger meeting flashed through Derek's mind, $47 million being discussed in air-conditioned boardrooms while this child scraped together nickels and dimes from other people's garbage to keep her mother alive. What's your name? He asked. The girl hesitated, then seemed to decide he was safe enough. Naomi. What's yours? Derek. He paused, wrestling with an impulse he didn't fully understand. Listen, Naomi, what if I have to go? She interrupted, hoisting her bag of recyclables over her shoulder with visible effort. Mr. Johnson closes at 5, and I still have 2 more streets to check. She started to walk away, then turned back. Thanks for not being mean about it. Some people yell at me, say I'm making the neighborhood look bad. She shrugged. But I'm not hurting anyone. Derek watched her disappear around the corner, her small figure dwarfed by the bag she dragged behind her. He stood there for several minutes, his expensive car idling nearby, his phone buzzing with increasingly frantic calls from his office. The merger meeting. The $47 million. The board members waiting for his decision. None of it seemed to matter anymore. When Derek finally got back in his car, his hands were shaking slightly. He sat there for a long moment, staring at the spot where Naomi had vanished, her words echoing in his mind. For my mom's medicine. His phone rang again. This time it was his assistant, probably calling to inform him that the Meridian deal had fallen through due to his absence. He should answer it. He should care. Instead, he turned off his phone and drove slowly toward his penthouse apartment, taking the long way through streets he never bothered to notice before. But no matter how far he drove, he couldn't shake the image of those wise brown eyes and that matter-of-fact voice explaining how a 9-year-old had become her family's sole provider. That night, Derek sat in his marble-floored kitchen, staring at a gourmet meal he'd had delivered from the city's most expensive restaurant. The food tasted like cardboard. His wine, a vintage that cost more than most people's monthly rent, might as well have been water. All he could think about was a little girl named Naomi, somewhere in those forgotten streets, probably going to bed hungry so her mother could have medicine. For the first time in 20 years, Derek Hayes, master of the universe, CEO of a financial empire, couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw small hands reaching into trash cans, and heard a child's voice saying with heartbreaking simplicity, "For my mom's medicine." The $47 million deal could wait. Tomorrow, he decided, he was going back to find her. Derek's morning routine felt different. Instead of his usual protein smoothie and financial reports, he found himself staring out his floor-to-ceiling windows, thinking about small hands digging through trash. His reflection in the glass looked foreign to him, same expensive suit, same perfectly styled hair, but something in his eyes had changed. By 2 p.m., he couldn't concentrate on anything. The quarterly projections on his computer screen blurred together as his mind wandered to narrow streets and broken pavement. His assistant knocked twice with urgent documents, but Derek barely registered her presence. "Cancel my 4 o'clock," he told her finally, grabbing his car keys. "Something important came up." The drive back felt different in daylight. Yesterday's detour had been accidental, desperate. Today, he navigated the route deliberately, memorizing each turn, each landmark. The Mercedes felt even more out of place in the harsh afternoon sun, its polished surface reflecting the reality around it like an uncomfortable mirror. He parked at the same spot and waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. Just when doubt began creeping in. Maybe she only came out once, maybe he'd imagined the whole thing, he saw her. Naomi emerged from a narrow alley, the same determined expression on her face, the same oversized garbage bag trailing behind her. Today she wore a different shirt, yellow with a cartoon character he didn't recognize, but it was just as faded as yesterday's pink one. Derek stayed in his car, something telling him to observe rather than interfere. He watched her work her way down the street with methodical precision. She knew which houses typically threw away the most recyclables, which trash cans were easiest to reach, which residents might chase her away. At the third house, an elderly man came out and said something to her. Naomi's shoulders sagged, and she moved on quickly, skipping that particular bin. Derek's hands tightened on the steering wheel. When she reached the next house, a woman emerged with a small bag of cans and handed them directly to Naomi. The girl's face broke into a smile so radiant it made Derek's chest ache. After an hour of collecting, Naomi began dragging her bag toward the main street. Derek followed at a distance, his expensive car creeping along like a predator stalking prey. He felt foolish, but he couldn't stop himself. He needed to understand her world. The recycling shop was a cramped storefront wedged between a laundromat and a check-cashing place. Through the dusty window, Derek watched Naomi dump her collection onto a scale. A heavy-set man with kind eyes, Mr. Johnson, Derek assumed, sorted through the items carefully. They talked like old friends, the man occasionally ruffling Naomi's hair or making her laugh. When the transaction was complete, Mr. Johnson handed her a small stack of bills and coins. Naomi counted them twice, her lips moving silently, then tucked the money carefully into a small purse she wore around her neck like a treasure chest. Derek expected her to head home. Instead, she walked 3 blocks to a bus stop. His heart rate quickened as he realized where she might be going. He followed the bus in his car, weaving through traffic, earning honks and angry gestures from other drivers who couldn't understand his sudden reckless urgency. The bus stopped at Metro General Hospital. Derek's world tilted. He parked quickly and followed Naomi through the hospital's automatic doors. The antiseptic smell hit him immediately, along with the quiet desperation that seemed to permeate every hospital corridor. Naomi moved through the maze of hallways with practiced ease, past the information desk, past the gift shop, past clusters of worried families clutching coffee cups and hope. She stopped at the elevator and pressed the button for the 4th floor. Derek slipped in just as the doors closed, positioning himself in the corner where she was least likely to notice him. She stared at the numbers climbing, her small hand clutching the purse around her neck. The 4th floor was oncology. The word hit Derek like a physical blow. Cancer. Naomi's mother had cancer. He followed at a careful distance as she walked down the hallway, past rooms filled with patients fighting battles he never had to imagine. She stopped at room 427 and knocked gently before pushing open the door. "Mama? I brought your medicine money." Derek positioned himself where he could see through the partially open door. The woman lying in the hospital bed was thin, her hair covered by a colorful headscarf, but even weakened by illness, she was unmistakably beautiful. And unmistakably familiar. The bottom dropped out of Derek's world. "Angela," he whispered. Angela Morrison. His college girlfriend. The woman he'd loved with the desperate intensity only possible at 22. The woman he'd left behind when the opportunity to build his empire had called. The woman whose letters he'd stopped reading when ambition consumed his heart. The woman he'd never forgotten, no matter how hard he tried. Derek stumbled backward, his expensive shoes squeaking against the polished hospital floor. His mind raced, calculating dates, adding years, subtracting the time since he'd last seen her. Naomi was 9, maybe 10 years old. They'd broken up 10 years ago, right before he'd moved across the country to start his company. The math was simple. Devastating. Impossible to ignore. He staggered to the hospital bathroom and splashed cold water on his face, staring at his reflection in the harsh fluorescent light. The successful CEO looked back at him, but behind his eyes lurked a truth he wasn't ready to face. When he returned to the hallway, Naomi was emerging from room 427, her small purse now empty, her mission complete for another day. She walked past him without recognition, just another businessman in a hospital full of strangers. But as she waited for the elevator, Derek caught a glimpse of her profile. The curve of her nose. The determined set of her jaw. The way she held her shoulders when she was thinking. He'd seen that exact expression every morning for years, in his own mirror. The elevator doors closed, taking Naomi away, but Derek remained frozen in the hallway, staring at room 427, where the woman he'd once loved was fighting for her life while their daughter, collected trash to pay for medicine. The weight of 10 years of silence crashed down on him like an avalanche. Derek stood in that sterile hospital hallway for what felt like hours, though the wall clock insisted only 20 minutes had passed. Nurses walked by in their soft-soled shoes, visitors clutched flowers and get-well cards, but he remained frozen, staring at the number 427 as if it held the secrets of the universe. Finally, his legs moved without conscious direction, carrying him toward the door he both needed and feared to approach. His hand trembled as he knocked, 3 soft taps that sounded thunderous in the quiet corridor. "Come in," came a voice from inside. Weak, but unmistakably the voice that had once whispered his name in darkened dorm rooms, laughed at his terrible jokes, told him she loved him under starlit skies. Derek pushed open the door. Angela was sitting up in bed, organizing a small pile of bills and coins on her bedside table, Naomi's recycling money. She looked up expecting to see a nurse or doctor, and her face went through a series of emotions so quickly Derek could barely process them: confusion, recognition, shock, and finally, a careful blankness that hurt more than anger would have. Derek, his name fell from her lips like a stone dropping into still water. "Hello, Angela." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The space suddenly felt impossibly small. "You look," he stopped himself. She looked sick. Fragile. But also somehow more beautiful than he remembered, as if illness had stripped away everything non-essential, leaving only the pure essence of who she was. "I look like I'm dying," she said matter-of-factly. "Because I am." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Angela, What are you doing here, Derek? After 10 years of silence, what could possibly bring you to my hospital room?" Her voice carried a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "I met her," he said quietly. "Naomi. Yesterday. She was collecting cans and bottles, and she said it was for her mother's medicine. I followed her today. I had no idea it was you until I saw." He gestured helplessly. Angela's face hardened. "So you followed my daughter? Like some kind of stalker?" "It wasn't like that. I was concerned about a child doing that kind of work." Any child, but even as he said it, he knew it wasn't entirely true. Something about Naomi had called to him in a way he couldn't explain. "Well, now you know. Mystery solved. You can go back to your corner office and your expensive suits and forget you ever saw us." Angela turned away, focusing on folding and refolding a hospital gown. "I can't do that." "Why not? You managed it before." The accusation hung in the air between them. Derek moved closer to her bed, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Angela, when I left for California, I thought. You thought you'd found something better. And you were right, weren't you? Look at you. That watch probably costs more than most people make in a year." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice remained steady. "I thought you'd moved on. I thought you were happy. I stopped calling because I was pregnant." The words exploded in the small room like a grenade. Derek felt his knees go weak, and he gripped the back of a plastic chair for support. "What?" "I found out 3 weeks after you left. I tried to tell you. I called, I wrote letters, I even drove to the airport once to try to catch you before your flight to that big job interview." Angela's composure cracked slightly. "But you'd already made it clear that your future didn't include me." Derek's mind reeled. "The letters. I got letters, but I thought you were trying to get me to come back, and I couldn't. The company, the opportunities. You never read them. It wasn't a question, and he couldn't lie. No. I couldn't. It hurt too much, and I thought a clean break would be better for both of us. Angela laughed, but there was no humor in it. A clean break. Yes, it was very clean for you, wasn't it? Is she? He couldn't finish the question. Is she yours? Angela's eyes met his directly for the first time since he'd entered the room. Look at her, Derek. Really look at her. She has your eyes, your stubborn chin, your way of tilting her head when she's thinking. Of course she's yours. The room spun around him. Derek sank into the plastic chair, his head in his hands. 9 years. He'd had a daughter for 9 years and never known. Why didn't you? What? Hunt you down? Demand child support? Ruin your precious career? Angela's voice turned bitter. I had my pride, Derek. And frankly, after you made it clear that nothing was more important than your ambitions, I didn't want my daughter to grow up feeling like a burden to her father. She wouldn't have been a burden. She could never be a burden. Easy to say now, when she's already raised herself. Angela wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Do you know what her first word was? Mama, do you know who taught her to ride a bike? Me, running alongside her with an 4-pole. Do you know who holds her when she has nightmares? Me, when I'm strong enough. Each word was a knife to his heart. Angela, I'm so sorry. If I had known. You would have what? Sent checks? Visited twice a year? Disrupted your important business deals to attend school plays? She shook her head. Maybe it's better this way. She doesn't know she has a father, so she can't be disappointed when he doesn't show up. Let me help now. The medical bills, the treatment costs, I have money. More than enough. Angela's expression turned to stone. Absolutely not. Angela, be reasonable. You're sick, she's 9 years old and collecting garbage to pay for your medicine. Let me. No. The word cracked like a whip. I won't take your guilt money, Derek. I won't let you write a check to make yourself feel better about 10 years of absence. We've survived this long without you, and we'll survive whatever comes next. This isn't about guilt. This is about taking care of my daughter. Now she's your daughter? Where was that paternal instinct for the past 9 years? Derek stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. That's not fair. I didn't know. Life isn't fair, Derek. Fair would be Naomi having a father who wanted to be part of her life. Fair would be me not dying and leaving her alone. Fair would be a lot of things that aren't going to happen. The silence stretched between them, filled with 10 years of hurt, regret, and words that could never be taken back. Finally, Angela spoke again, her voice quiet but firm. I need you to leave, Derek. And I need you to stay away from Naomi. She's been through enough without getting attached to someone who's going to disappear again when things get complicated. I'm not going to disappear. Aren't you? When your board of directors finds out you're spending time in charity wards instead of boardrooms? When this starts affecting your precious company? How long before you decide we're too messy for your clean, successful life? Derek wanted to argue, wanted to promise, wanted to make grand gestures that would somehow erase the past decade. But standing there in that hospital room, looking at the woman he'd loved and abandoned, he realized that words were meaningless. He'd already proven who he was 10 years ago. The question was, could he prove he'd become someone different? Without another word, he turned and walked out of room 427, leaving behind the echo of his daughter's laughter and the weight of a father's love that had come 10 years too late. For 3 days, Derek honored Angela's wishes. He sat in his corner office, staring at spreadsheets that might as well have been written in ancient Sanskrit, while his mind wandered to narrow streets and a little girl who didn't know her father's name. His assistant grew concerned about his distracted state. Board members whispered about his recent absences. The Meridian deal languished in legal limbo. None of it mattered. On the 4th day, he broke. Derek found himself parked at the familiar corner, watching Naomi emerge from her recycling routine. But this time, instead of following from a distance, he got out of his car and approached her directly. "Naomi?" She looked up, recognition dawning on her face. "You're the man from the other day. Derek, right?" She seemed pleased to see him, which made his chest tighten with emotions he couldn't name. "That's right. I was wondering. Would you like some help carrying that bag? It looks heavy." Naomi studied him with those wise brown eyes, his eyes he now knew. "Why would you want to help me?" "Because everyone deserves help sometimes." The truth of it surprised him as he said it. She considered this, then shrugged. "Okay, but I have to warn you, your fancy clothes are gonna get dirty." Derek laughed, genuinely laughed for the first time in days. "I think I can handle a little dirt." He took one handle of her bag while she held the other, and they walked together toward Mr. Johnson's recycling shop. Along the way, Naomi chattered about her route, pointing out houses where people were kind, warning him about Mrs. Peterson's mean dog, explaining the difference between aluminum cans and steel ones. "The aluminum ones pay better," she said matter-of-factly. "But you have to be careful with the steel ones because they can cut you if they're bent funny." At the recycling shop, Mr. Johnson raised an eyebrow at Derek's expensive suit but said nothing. He weighed Naomi's collection and handed her the usual payment, which she counted twice before tucking it into her small purse. "Mr. Johnson," Naomi said suddenly, "this is my friend Derek. He helped me carry the heavy stuff today." "Friend." The word hit Derek like a warm wave. "Nice to meet you," Mr. Johnson said, extending a weathered hand. "Any friend of Naomi's is good people." Outside the shop, Derek made a decision that would have horrified his former self. "Naomi, I was thinking. Would you like to get some ice cream?" "My treat." Her face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Are you sure?" "Absolutely sure." They found a small ice cream truck parked at a nearby playground. Naomi ordered a simple vanilla cone, but her eyes went wide when the vendor handed it to her. "I haven't had ice cream in forever," she whispered. They sat on a park bench, Naomi swinging her legs as she licked her cone with the dedication of someone who knew treats were rare. Derek found himself studying her profile, memorizing the way her nose crinkled when she concentrated, the way she hummed softly when she was content. "Naomi," he said carefully, "tell me about school. What's your favorite subject?" "Science," she said immediately. "Especially biology. I want to be a doctor when I grow up, like the ones who take care of my mom." The simple declaration broke his heart. "That's a wonderful dream. It's not just a dream," she said seriously. "I'm gonna do it. I study real hard, and I read all the medical books I can find at the library. Did you know that cancer cells divide faster than normal cells? That's why chemotherapy works. It stops fast-dividing cells, but sometimes it stops good fast-dividing cells too, like the ones that make your hair." Derek stared at her. 9 years old, and she was explaining oncology with the casual expertise of someone who'd lived it. "You're very smart, Naomi. I have to be. Smart people become doctors, and doctors help sick people get better." She paused, her expression growing solemn. "My mom needs to get better." Over the following weeks, their afternoon meetings became routine. Derek would finish his recycling help, then they'd sit and talk. He learned that Naomi loved to read but had to return library books quickly because other people needed them. He discovered she was teaching herself Spanish from a book she'd found at a garage sale. He found out she'd never been to a movie theater, a zoo, or a Rio restaurant. Each revelation was another crack in the wall around his heart. One afternoon, while walking past a bicycle shop, Naomi stopped and pressed her face against the window, staring at a small purple bike with rainbow streamers. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Derek looked at the price tag, less than what he spent on lunch most days. "Would you like to go inside and look at it?" "Oh no," Naomi said quickly. "I can't afford anything in there. I just like to look sometimes." The next day, Derek returned to the shop alone. When he arrived at their usual meeting spot, he had the purple bicycle waiting, complete with a helmet decorated with stars. Naomi's reaction was everything he'd hoped for and more. She stood frozen, staring at the bike as if it might vanish if she blinked. Is that for me? Happy early birthday, Derek said, though he had no idea when her actual birthday was, another painful reminder of all he missed. But I can't. It's too much. My mom will. Your mom doesn't have to know it came from me, Derek said gently. As far as she knows, you found it. Naomi threw her arms around his waist, hugging him with the fierce intensity of a child who rarely received gifts. Thank you, Mr. Derek. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As he taught her to ride the bike that afternoon, running alongside her with his hand on the seat until she found her balance, Derek felt something he never experienced before, the pure, uncomplicated joy of making his child happy. But even as Naomi laughed and called, "Look at me! Look at me!" as she pedaled in wobbly circles, Derek couldn't shake Angela's words. She's been through enough without getting attached to someone who's going to disappear again. Watching Naomi's radiant smile, he realized the terrible truth: she was already attached. And despite Angela's warnings, despite his own fears about the future, so was he. The fragile bond between father and daughter grew stronger each day, built on ice cream cones and bicycle lessons and the simple miracle of being together. But fragile things, Derek knew, were easily broken. And Angela was watching. The confrontation came on a Tuesday. Derek had just finished helping Naomi with her homework at the small table behind Mr. Johnson's recycling shop, a makeshift classroom where she practiced multiplication tables between sorting bottles. Her math skills amazed him. She calculated weights and money with the precision of someone whose survival depended on getting the numbers right. "Mr. Derek," Naomi said, closing her notebook, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why don't you have kids of your own? You're really good with me, and you seem like you'd be a nice daddy." The innocent question hit him like a sledgehammer. Derek struggled for words, his throat tight. "Well, I work a lot. My job keeps me very busy." "That's sad," Naomi said matter-of-factly. "Work is important, but family is more important." "At least, that's what my mom always says." Before Derek could respond, his phone buzzed urgently. Then again. And again. "I'm sorry, Naomi, I need to take this." The caller ID showed his board chairman, Richard Morrison. Derek stepped away, but not far enough. "Derek, where the hell are you?" Richard's voice was loud enough that Naomi could hear every word. "The Meridian deal is falling apart, the investors are getting nervous, and you've been AWOL for 3 weeks. The board is meeting in an hour to discuss your fitness for leadership." "Richard, I can explain." "You better have a damn good explanation. This company doesn't run itself, and lately it seems like you've forgotten that. Get your ass back here now, or we'll find someone who remembers what his priorities should be." The line went dead. Derek stared at his phone, feeling the weight of his two worlds colliding. "Mr. Derek?" Naomi's small voice brought him back to the present. "Are you in trouble?" "Nothing I can't handle," he lied, forcing a smile. But the lie tasted bitter on his tongue. That evening, Derek sat in the sterile boardroom, surrounded by men in identical suits discussing his recent instability and questionable priorities. He tried to focus on their concerns about quarterly projections and shareholder confidence, but all he could think about was Naomi's question. "You seem like you'd be a nice daddy, Derek?" Richard's sharp voice cut through his thoughts. "We're waiting for an explanation. I've been dealing with a personal matter." "Personal matters don't pay our shareholders," board member James Whitfield interjected. "Your father built this company on the principle that business comes first. Always. Is that still your philosophy?" Derek thought about his father, a man who missed every school play, every birthday, every moment that mattered, all for the sake of business success. He'd sworn he'd never become that man. And yet here he was. "Of course," Derek heard himself say. "Business comes first." The words felt like ashes in his mouth. The next afternoon, Derek arrived at their usual meeting spot to find Naomi sitting alone on the curb, her bicycle lying beside her. She wasn't collecting recyclables. She wasn't doing homework. She was just sitting, staring at nothing. Hey, what's wrong? He asked, settling beside her. My mom's mad at me, Naomi said quietly. Real mad. What happened? She found out about you. About the bike, about our ice cream dates, about how you helped me with my homework. Naomi's voice cracked. She said I'm not supposed to see you anymore. Derek's heart sank. Naomi. She said you're going to leave me, just like. Naomi stopped herself. Just like what? Nothing. It doesn't matter. But her eyes filled with tears. Are you going to leave me, Mr. Derek? The question hung in the air between them like a sword. Derek thought about the boardroom, about Richard's ultimatum, about the company that demanded his complete devotion. I don't want to leave you, he said finally. But you will, won't you? When your important business needs you? Out of the mouths of babes. Naomi had cut straight to the heart of it with the brutal honesty only children possessed. Before Derek could answer, his phone rang again. The board. Another crisis. Another demand for his immediate attention. He looked at the phone, then at Naomi's tear-stained face, then back at the phone. He answered it. Derek, thank God. Richard's voice boomed. We need you here immediately. The Meridian people are threatening to walk. I'll be right there, Derek said, hating himself with each word. He hung up and turned to Naomi, who was already standing, understanding written across her young face. Your work needs you, she said simply. Naomi, I'm sorry It's okay, Mr. Derek. I understand. Work is important. But as she picked up her bicycle and began walking away, she turned back one more time. I just thought maybe I was important too. Derek sat on that curb for 20 minutes after she disappeared, his phone buzzing relentlessly with increasingly frantic calls from his board. When he finally stood to leave, he caught sight of himself in a shop window reflection. He looked exactly like his father. That night, after salvaging the Meridian deal through sheer force of will and caffeine, Derek drove past the hospital. He didn't go inside. He couldn't face Angela's knowing look, couldn't handle her saying, I told you so, without actually speaking the words. Instead, he sat in his car in the parking lot, staring up at the 4th floor, knowing his daughter was up there visiting her dying mother, and that both of them were now convinced he was exactly what Angela had always said he was, a man who would choose business over family, every single time. The worst part was, they were right. Derek Hayes, master of the universe, had everything he'd ever thought he wanted. A thriving company, unlimited wealth, the respect of his peers, and a corner office view that stretched to the horizon. But he'd lost the only thing that actually mattered, his daughter's trust. And this time, he wasn't sure he could earn it back. The letter arrived on a Friday morning. Derek found it slipped under his office door, written in Naomi's careful handwriting on lined notebook paper. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. Dear Mr. Derek, Mom is getting worse. The doctors say she needs a special treatment that costs a lot of money. I've been collecting extra cans and bottles, but it's not enough. I saved up $247 so far, but they need thousands. Mom says I shouldn't ask you for help because you have important business to do. She says people like us shouldn't bother people like you. But I thought maybe you might want to know. I miss our talks. I miss riding my bike with you. I miss having a grown-up who listened to me. I hope your work is going good. Love, Naomi. P.S. I still want to be a doctor. Maybe someday I can help other kids' moms get better. Derek read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. Then he did something he hadn't done since he was 7 years old. He cried. When Richard Morrison walked into his office 20 minutes later, he found Derek staring out the window, the letter clutched in his hands. The Japanese investors are here for the presentation, Richard announced. This deal could net us $80 million. Are you ready? Derek didn't turn around. Richard, what was my father like when I was young? What? Derek, we don't have time for. Humor me. Richard sighed impatiently. He was brilliant. Driven. He built this company from nothing and turned it into an empire. He was a man who understood that success requires sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? Time with family, personal relationships, hobbies, all the things that distract from building something lasting. Richard's voice carried a note of pride. He once told me that his legacy wasn't you, it was this company. Companies last forever if you build them right. People just fade away. Derek finally turned around. Do you have children, Richard? A son and daughter. Both grown now. Do they call you? Visit on holidays? Tell you about their lives? Richard shifted uncomfortably. They're busy with their own careers. I taught them well. Or they learned that work always came first. Derek stood up, straightening his tie. Cancel the meeting with the Japanese investors. Are you insane? This is an $80 million deal. I'm resigning as CEO. The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Richard's face went through several shades of red before settling on purple. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Derek was already packing personal items from his desk. I'm selling my shares back to the company. I'm liquidating my assets. And I'm using the money to do something that actually matters. This is about that girl, isn't it? The one you've been sneaking around to see? Richard's voice turned venomous. You're throwing away everything your father built for some street kid who isn't even. She's my daughter. The words came out quiet but firm. And her mother is the woman I should have married 10 years ago instead of marrying this company. Richard stared at him as if he'd announced he was joining the circus. Derek, think about what you're doing. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities. You're right. I can't walk away from my responsibilities. That's exactly why I have to do this. 3 hours later, Derek stood in the lobby of Metro General Hospital, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt instead of his usual armor of expensive suits. In his hands, he carried a folder containing bank transfer forms, legal documents, and a certified check that represented the liquidation of his mansion, his art collection, and most of his stock portfolio. He found them in room 427. Angela was sleeping, her face pale but peaceful. Naomi sat beside the bed, reading aloud from a library book about marine biology. She looked up when he entered, her eyes widening with surprise. Mr. Derek? How did you? She glanced at her letter on the bedside table. Oh. I got your letter, he said softly, not wanting to wake Angela. And I want you to know something very important. You are important, Naomi. You're the most important thing in the world. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. But your work, my work can wait. My work will always wait for you. He knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. I made a promise to myself that I would never be the kind of father who put anything before his child. I broke that promise, and I'm sorry. Father? Naomi's voice was barely a whisper. Behind them, Angela stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw Derek kneeling beside Naomi's chair, her expression shifted from confusion to alarm. Derek, what are you doing here? I told you. I know what you told me. And I know I haven't earned the right to be here. But I'm not leaving this time, Angela. Not ever. He stood and placed the folder on her bedside table. I've paid for your treatment. All of it. The experimental therapy, the medications, whatever you need. Angela struggled to sit up. I told you, we don't want your guilt money. It's not guilt money. Derek's voice was steady, certain. I sold everything. The company, the house, all of it. I started a foundation, the Naomi Angela Hayes Foundation, to help families facing medical crises. And I want to be part of this family, if you'll let me. Hayes? Naomi looked between them, understanding dawning on her young face. Angela's eyes were wide with shock. You sold everything? Everything that mattered to the old Derek. None of it matters to the man I want to be. He looked at Naomi, whose hand had somehow found its way into his. I want to be the father who shows up. Who stays. Who chooses you over everything else, every single time. Naomi's grip on his hand tightened. You really want to be my daddy? The question broke something open in Derek's chest. More than anything in the world. She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with those wise brown eyes. Then she smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her since their argument. "I wish you were my dad," she whispered. Angela, tears streaming down her cheeks, reached out and took both their hands. "He is your dad, baby girl. He always was." 6 months later, Derek pushed Angela's wheelchair through the hospital courtyard while Naomi rode circles around them on her purple bicycle. Angela's hair was growing back in soft curls, and her cheeks had regained some of their color. The experimental treatment had worked, not perfectly, but enough. They were headed home to their small house in Naomi's old neighborhood, where Derek had learned to live without marble countertops and city views. Where he'd discovered that the sound of his daughter practicing piano was better than any business presentation. Where he'd found that making pancakes on Saturday mornings was worth more than all the board meetings in the world. "Daddy, watch this!" Naomi called out, attempting a wobbly figure eight on her bike. Daddy? He would never get tired of hearing that word. As they walked together through the afternoon sunshine, Derek realized he'd finally learned the difference between success and significance. Success was what you accumulated. Significance was what you left behind. And walking beside him, laughing at Naomi's bicycle tricks, was his entire legacy, not built in boardrooms or measured in dollars, but created through choice after choice to show up, to stay, to love without condition. He was finally the father his daughter deserved. And for the first time in his life, Derek Hayes was truly wealthy.